Good morning everyone, welcome back to Garage Stories. So in today's video, we're gonna fix this Husqvarna Z246 that's been sitting in my shop for like a year and a half. At least that's the plan. I've had this mower for quite a while. I picked it up maybe 3 years ago. It was a free mower. It came with another one. They were both free. So the real issue with this mower is that I've worked a lot on it and not found the real issue. So I'm planning to go ahead and just swap this engine out of here. I know it hurts because I put so much work into trying to fix this engine. In fact, I even dove back into this a few days or weeks ago. And I was like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this, and I pulled the head off and I couldn't find a real issue. So I'm a little bit stuck. I fixed some issues, but they didn't solve the problem where this engine runs way too fast. It doesn't really like to run on one cylinder. If I was younger and wanting to go into working on engines like this a lot more, yeah, I mean, it'd be a great project to just figure out more about how these engines work. However, that's not my goal. My goal is to get this mower fixed, out of my shop, and sold, and regain my shop space so I can do other projects. It's time to cut my losses and move on. And sometimes we learn that by losing, we actually end up winning, because you have to accept a loss to move on. At the end of the day, I need to get this thing out of here. So how are we gonna do that? Well, I've got another engine out there right outside the door that I think I can swap in here. So all right, let's go break a wrench. So this is the mower I want to pull the engine out of, and it's literally right outside the door of the shop. And there's a reason for that. I was seriously considering putting the engine from this mower into another project I had, which was my John Deere Z245, which I already had swapped an engine into, and I had issues getting it running quite right, but I don't think I really need to swap another engine in to resolve them. In this case, I think I have deeper issues with an engine, so I'm gonna take the engine and throw it in here instead of the Z245, which I hopefully will get back on and fix also very shortly. So there is a major difference here, which is that this engine has a separate throttle and choke, whereas the engine in there just has a single throttle choke on one controller. What I'm thinking I can do is reuse this throttle cable for my throttle and then just drill a hole here and mount my choke. There are some benefits to this engine. It has the electric PTO already. That means this engine has the charging system that can handle an electric PTO, which is something I did not know to think about a while back. And I had someone mention that in the comments on one of my other engine swaps, that there's gonna be issues because of that. And it's something I hadn't really thought about. Another thing that is really good about this engine is it has the old school aluminum manifold here, which means if we take off the carburetor, we can bolt it back down without concern of warping the plastic manifolds like that engine has. This engine is actually a higher horsepower engine, if I remember right. I think this one is, yeah, it's a 25 horse. The one in there is a 23 horse. The other question is, does this engine run? I know it test ran a year or two ago when I tried it. It may need a carburetor clean. And then the last issue that we may have is, are the shaft sizes the same? And I don't know the answer to that. We're probably gonna find that one out the hard way. If I get it running in the frame here, I can actually test out the transmission a little bit, which would be great. So I could actually like sell that as a tested transmission. Well, let's get into it. We need to get to work. I think my jumper pack's getting tired. All right, so I hooked up my deep cycle battery that I used to use before my jumper pack. Let's see if it has any more to give. Okay, key's still doing nothing. Let's arc the solenoid, see if it's any better. It's worse. So we may have bad connections, or we have the fact that I just hooked it up completely backwards, which is not good. I don't do that very often. That ain't doing it. Let's do it a different way. There we go, we'll ground off that over there. Okay, we're not getting any fuel out the fuel pump yet. All right, getting the engine all loosened up, that's good. But we need some fire in there. So we're gonna have some fun here and play with some carb cleaner. I'm really surprised it hasn't lit up yet. I'm not sure why it's not firing. I don't think I need to hook power to the ignition side to make it fire. It could be a safety switch somewhere. My clutch is not engaged. Well, that would be my problem. Why'd I forget to do that? It's gonna fire right up now. Told you. Okay. I think I'm wasting my time trying to get the engine running in this mower frame. It's gonna take away from actually completing the actual project I'm trying to complete. Fuel's not getting into the carburetor, and that makes sense because there's an electric solenoid on the bottom there that is not actuating. So I put some other solenoids on the wiring harness and I don't feel like they're actuating, so there may be some electrical issues here. It also just occurred to me that I may not have had my negative hooked up over here. Let's try hooking the negative back up. Oh, key on. That's working. I don't know if that solenoid would fit in there or not. That's a good sign, and I didn't realize. Such a silly mistake. I left my battery disconnected over here because I didn't want to fry anything, and then I forgot. Okay, now I know that the wiring to the solenoid is working. I plugged back in the original one. Now we can cycle the key off and on, see if we hear any clicks. No clicks. And yes, I am still connected here and here. I need to get this mower pulled out where I can access that carburetor a little more fully. All right, so we need to get this solenoid off, see if we can free that up. The carburetor feels pretty loose in other ways. I haven't noticed any issues. Let's see if we can get that wire back off of there. Now we use our special wrench that we've ground thinner to fit in here and see if that works. Oh yeah, that's not gonna go anywhere. Runs right into the bracket here. Okay. Hey, we're getting fuel though. So fuel is getting in, so my float is not stuck in the wrong position. So I'm gonna either have to pull the carburetor out or I'm gonna have to pull the governor assembly off. It may be easier to pull the governor assembly off, quite honestly. I've got a path forward now. So what would be a bad situation is if these bolts are actually helping hold the governor assembly in a particular position. I don't think they are. I don't think they're slotted holes. I think this just bolts on there that way. What does affect things is down here, but we're not messing with that. Could be a live and learn situation. Oh, that feels like it's working right. What? I need to give this thing another shot. So glad I didn't take the carburetor off to find that out, because I know the plug is working. So that solenoid should be working. Yeah, we're getting the proper click. That means this engine should be able to fire and run in theory. I can go ahead and throw this thing back in there. It seems like this engine has everything it needs to run, so it may run. And by run, I mean like stay running and run through from the carburetor. So we'll see here. Let's get all these tools put in the seat, which is the best place for tools. Like a kitten, relatively. That runs great. Now it did start running a little lean there, but that makes sense because we're not going through our air filter, so I need to put the air filter housing on there. This thing is purring, and it started spouting fuel out of here, which means we're getting good vacuum to this old fuel pump. Yeah, as long as we're not leaking anywhere, which it doesn't look like we're leaking up there, doesn't look like we're leaking there on the old fuel line, we should be good to try a test run this thing. I'm just so excited it runs so good. So whatever mower I put that in, it's gonna run great. It runs really good considering, but it is just slightly lean. You hear it popping there every so often. Alright, so it didn't all exactly pertain to this video, so probably be in a different one, but we tested out the transmission on this mower and it works fine, so The engine works good. That's what we're after today. Let's go ahead and see if we can get this thing pulled out, except for it's gonna be piping hot, so we'll have to be a little bit careful. But we should be able to at least jack this thing up and start undoing some of the connections around it. That auxiliary fuel tank worked just fine up there. This must have been a nice mower in its day, but it's gonna have new life in that zero turn. So now that we verified that this engine runs, let's get to pulling it out. I think I want to put the head back on here before I pull the engine out. Try to keep all the parts together in case I ever do want to do anything else with this engine again. As a lot of you know, I have a lot of other parts mowers out here. I don't like taking apart engines because I can get in over my head, spend way too much time on it, and that's exactly what's happened here. But on the plus side, I have learned more about the inner workings of these engines. I've seen what they look like. I've done it now, so I know how to do that if I ever feel like I need to. But for my situation, I feel like it's kind of a waste of time. I'm not a small engine mechanic. I probably never will be, except for through the power of YouTube. And I'm helping other people that are not small engine mechanics as well. It depends on what your goals are, what you want to learn, what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. I could just spend the next however long pushing my way through this project until I get this engine figured out. But what have I gained at the end of that? Because I don't really plan on doing a bunch more engines like that. That's not my long-term goal. So in this situation, I think it makes more sense to swap another engine in. And for other people out there who don't have a parts yard, you have to realize that sometimes you can pick up a cheap riding mower off of Marketplace and pull the engine out of there and swap it into your mower. So you don't have to buy an engine, used or new. New ones are super expensive. You can buy a used mower, pull the engine out of it, put it in your project, and scrap the rest of the mower, or you can sell it for parts. Hopefully I'm helping you in your path to trying to fix your mower if you are on that path trying to fix a mower. All right, so I threw this engine back together real quick, and now I'm gonna try to pull the engine out. It should be pretty straightforward and easy because I've already had this engine out of here before. Basically, there's 4 bolts that hold it in, one at each corner down below here, one of which I had issues with in the past and I had to drill out and retapped it to a larger size bolt. Shouldn't be an issue uninstalling it though. So we've got 4 bolts. You got your positive wire going to your starter, and then you need to unplug your wiring harness itself, and then you need to disconnect your fuel line, your throttle cable. Then you undo the bolt on the underside, drop off the PTO clutch, and then you also drop off the transmission drive pulley. Then the whole engine should pop up and out. The exhaust pipe is not fastened in there, so it should just come right out. I already have videos showing that on the channel here, so we'll just show you a few highlights, or we'll just time lapse it. And here's the PTO clutch wire, I forgot to mention that one. This spring right here goes on top of that bolt, and I actually was able to stretch it by hand, pull it off pretty easy. Got it. All right. The engine should be free now. Sweet. Disconnect a vapor return line over here. All right, so now for pulling the donor engine. Well, interestingly, I did notice there is some electrical fixing, I guess, over here. Don't really know what all they did. I'm gonna leave it there for right now. I may take it apart later and just try to kind of double check it. But it was running, so I'm not super worried about it right now for just getting it in there and getting it running. Same situation. I'll pop out this headlight wire. Positive wire to the starter. We've got our plug. We've got our PTO wire, which I forgot to mention on the first one, at first at least. Got our fuel line we need to disconnect. Then we got on this one a throttle and a choke cable. So this would be your choke up top. This would be your throttle down below. The exhaust should pull right out of there. It's loose. Then you got the same situation underneath. You got 4 bolts that hold the engine down. 1 bolt on the crankshaft, which holds on the clutches and pulleys. On that mower, we had a support shaft going between the 2 transmissions that kind of got in the way. On this one, we may have other stuff that's in the way. Some steering linkage that might get in the way. The mower deck that might get in the way. Yeah, I probably should go ahead and pop the deck off. Then I may put it on the lift and we'll go from there. Since I showed everything pretty well, I'm gonna go ahead and time lapse it this time. And if anything is a pain, like getting those pulleys off, then I'll show you. So, got the engine most of the way out. I say that. I haven't actually undone the 4 bolts that hold it, but I found this interesting. So I was looking around here. You know, all the bolts were pretty normal, like there's one there, you see the backside. That one you don't. So looking from the underside, I don't know if you can see that bolt has come out quite a bit. Don't know why. But I'm also noticing a lot of oil residue around the engine. So hopefully this thing isn't actually leaking oil. But it's pretty gunky under here. You never know if that was from previous oil changes or what. Got everything out and I checked the shaft size and it seems to be the same diameter because the PTO off of this engine fits on that engine. So that's really good. That's a major concern. I don't know if the lengths are the same yet. This one might be a little longer. Length is less of an ordeal than diameter. I did notice something else. So the fuel comes in on this side of the engine over here, and if you take that and put it over here, that means this side here. This fuel came in on this side, so we'll have to reroute the fuel line, probably run it behind the engine, may have to lengthen it. I'm ready to go ahead and pull those last 4 bolts, and we'll see if our manifolds will interchange. If not, we'll bolt up the manifolds from the other engine. Getting really close now. Victory! We got the engine free. It should easily pick up now. It's not really attached anymore, but I did notice something about this mower I wanted to point out. The front axle is bent, so you can see that wheel is like a little further back. Interestingly, the mower turns sharper that way. This wheel can go so far that way that it'll like dig in. I also noticed the drag link for the deck on this side that goes in right there has been refabricated. Sounds to me like this mower was in an accident, ran into something pretty good, and it broke that drag length, bent that mount a little bit, pushed back the front axle there, and possibly also caught the wheel and skipped it over on the steering rack. Not really sure. So my plan for getting that engine over there is to simply roll this mower forward as far as I can and just kind of walk the engine over there. Sounds simple enough. The exhaust pipes fit. That's great. Wow, that looks good. These shrouds are like made out of fiberglass and it really irritates your skin. I'm gonna have like red clouds on my arms once they start oxidizing like that. Pretty uncomfortable. We are so close now. We know this engine runs. It's actually in there. The exhaust lined up, which is great. So we just need to start hooking up all these controls. Well, we need to bolt it down first. That's what we should do. We need to bolt it down, make sure all the PTO, clutch, and all that stuff fits. I'll probably go ahead and time lapse that and bring you back in when I start hooking up important stuff like the throttle cable and maybe remounting a choke, that kind of stuff. I'm pretty excited about this. Oh, it's gonna be so nice to have this mower working. Well, we had a situation come up. Remember that bolt hole that did not have the bolt all the way in? Well, I'm having difficulty getting the bolt threaded back into that hole. I'm thinking that the threads may be messed up somewhat, so I'm gonna try to run my tap through there, see if I can clean up those threads, make sure it works well. I also noticed that my oil filter seemed a little bit loose, so that might have been why there's so much oil around. I did try to wipe off the bottom of the engine here since we're not going to really see that much again. Finally remembered where I keep my tap set. All right, let's get this engine back in. Okay, we tried to clean up the engine a little bit, got the bolts in there, a little bit of a pain, but I think it'll work out okay. I definitely have anti-seize on there, probably way too much. I did use the impact to get them in once I felt they were halfway decent. Now we're getting the pulleys installed on the crankshaft. So once these are done down there, we can just get the belts on and move over to doing stuff up above. Just occurred to me that we should get our drive belts installed all the way first. Go ahead and apply tension to that pulley. Take this spring here. I got it off, so I think I can get it on. But that is not always the case. Got it. Okay, back to the underside. This part is so hard to get that clutch up there. The clutch is so stinking heavy. How much do these things weigh? I don't know. 15 pounds, 10 pounds? The kiwi needs to be about there. Can I rotate my engine? Like that. It's not engaging my stay. Let's try this again. Oh, we got it. We got it. Oh, wow. That's exhausting trying to get that up there. Now I just need to run this up through there to plug it in. Whew, that was tough and messy, but I'm done on the underside except for hooking up the deck belt and also putting that support back in there. All right, we are back at it here. This is now Monday morning. I was doing all this work on Saturday. Let's see if we can get this thing wrapped up real quick before work. I need to finish getting this bolt installed down here. It's a little tough because this bar is kind of tight, so it's hard to get that washer between the bar and the casting on the transmission housing. So we need to get that in there and also get the deck belt on. Oh, it looks like it's on. We'll make sure it's routed correctly up front though. So up top, what we need to do is we need to get the fuel line hooked up. I'm probably going to use that piece of brand new fuel line I had on this auxiliary tank here. Then we need to get the throttle cable hooked up if that's long enough. It looks like it should just barely be long enough. Pretty close to the exhaust, but not a lot you can do about that. Hook up the starter, plug in the wiring harness, and then I'll probably grab the choke cable out of here and see if we can get it connected somewhere in here. Like drill a hole there and put it in there. Let's get to it. Let's get this knocked out. Mission accomplished. Next up, the throttle cable. I take pictures of this stuff before I take it apart on the other side. It was connected to the lower one here. Okay, let's stay the same. So the handle is set to low throttle. So I need to make sure this is all the way one way or the other, basically. And since I'm using a throttle control that had a choke on there, there's usually like a detent for full throttle and then beyond that is choke. And it goes all the way up and snaps into that detent, which is right about where it should go. Let's get the electrical hooked up and then move on to the fuel line and choke. Gonna throw a battery charger on there for a little bit. Hopefully that'll help increase the odds of this thing working. So now the fuel line. I don't like how hard and brittle this fuel line is right here, but if it doesn't leak, I'm not gonna really mess with it yet. So I'm gonna replace this chunk going out of the fuel filter. Yeah, I should probably replace the fuel filter at some point too. All right, fuel line. Alright, so now fuel line is all hooked up except for I'll leave that off right now. And we'll see if fuel comes squirting out of there. Fuel valve is currently off, but we have one last thing to do, which is to connect the choke cable. So this choke cable is held in by what appears to be a nut here. Don't know if I can get my 1/2 inch on there. There's not much there to grab. Let's see if I can get my channel locks on there instead. Well, we're getting that little rubber boot off. So there is also a nut on the back side. My expectation is this front nut is the one that really holds it in. So you can see that's coming off there. It's backing its way out. All right, this is completely free and loose now. So at this point, I'm just going to pull the cable out here, and I'm holding the nut on the back side so I don't lose it. And here we go. Here is the nut. It's on the back side, sides up, and it threads into here. So this part here is a metal, like it's not flexible, but it's kind of like the bracket. The rest of this is the regular flexible coil hose. What I would like to do is drill a hole in here. Just run the cable down through here. But it looks like the gas tank kind of comes forward this way. So I would want to put that hole as close to the hour meter as I could to give good room for it. So put the hole like right over there. Let's pop out the drill and make this happen. Okay, I did a quick mock-up with this other hole that was already here. I'm not going to use that one because it would interfere with my throttle lever, but it allows me to see that I think we really will have enough room over here. I flipped this thing upside down to give me an idea of how much space the head needs. I could have it overlap the hour meter a little bit because of the mushroom shape, but I think that'll work just fine right there because it's a little further this way and that way, and the tank contour will actually help. I think I'm going to try using a 7/16 drill bit, and maybe just a tad small, but I do want it to be pretty tight in here. What do you guys think? 5/8? I think that's still a little small. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. I just don't want it to be huge. Almost. Needs a 3/8. Oh, perfect. All right, now a push-pull choke. All right, well, I'm out of time again. It's time for me to start working on my day job, but this thing should be 100% ready except for needing a jump. It's like the battery is dead. Yeah, this thing's still got oil in it. This thing is ready to run. And of course, I left that off so we could see if the fuel pump works. I think later today we'll be able to test this thing out. Oh, sheesh, I forgot to hook up the choke. We also need to put a jumper pack on here. All right, we're ready for the first moment of truth. We're gonna see if the engine cranks over. Fuel is not hooked up yet, so it shouldn't really fire, except there may be fuel in the bowl, so it may fire. Let's see if I got a good connection here. The battery is dead, so there may be issues there, but let's find out. Sweet, that's a good sign there. Our fuel line is actually turned off down here, so let's turn that on. Now let's see if we get some fuel pumping out of there. Just a little bit. All right, fuel pump seems to still be working. Put this on here. All right, everyone, this is the moment we have been waiting for now, where we actually see if this thing will start and run. Do you think it'll fire? Oh yeah, pretty cool. Need a better battery. Starter's not disengaged yet. All right, well, we know it runs. I think now we just need to get probably some fresh oil for this thing, a new battery, and we can test this thing out. Yeah, there's other miscellaneous stuff to put back together. Wow, sweet. Even though the engine seems like it's running fairly well now, because the starter was hanging up a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and pull off this shroud and make sure that there's no debris under here, and I'm also gonna put some lubricant on the starter to help it disengage. I've got another battery I'm charging up that I'm gonna throw in here, and hopefully we can get this thing running on its own in just a few minutes. All right, went ahead and got this off, and this looks really pretty clean. I'm quite hopeful that the oil evidence I was seeing on the underside was because my oil filter was actually a little bit loose. I tightened that up. Went ahead and lubricated this. Seems to be working fine, relatively fine. If it gets a slow spin, it'll get stuck like that. But then it drops down. Okay, seems to be working pretty good now. I think it's time to put it back together, get it down off the jack stands, put the battery in there, and we might be able to take this thing outside. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this panel in here. Make this thing a little bit more closed up. So the issue with this panel here is essentially it's supposed to be installed with this whole fender off, and the bolts come from the inside, not the outside. We can mess with that more later if we want to. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, after months of being in the shop, we're going to see if this thing is ready to come out and start working. There's still cosmetic things that we can fix up on here, but hopefully everything mechanically is fine on here now. We should now be able to start this thing up and drive it out of the shop. Let's see. We had some fuel spitting out of the fuel pump. The fuel pump is pretty wet on the outside, and there's the exhaust down there. So you don't really want a fire hazard. So I'm gonna see if I can swap out fuel pumps real quick. So the mower runs great, and it actually cuts pretty good, except for the deck belt was way too loose. So I popped off the plate to look at it, and yeah, it's definitely loose. And my symptom was the engine wasn't bogging at all, but my blade tip speed, I could hear it slowing down. Like it sounded like my blades were turning off. And sure enough, yeah, it's loose. I'm thinking that I backed off this tensioner about as far as I could go. So I think I need to run this puppy in quite a ways. That should be tight enough to get some grass cut now. All right, it's running and cutting really good now. The only thing is I think I might be running out of gas, but tightening up that tensioner and pulley helped a lot. Sometimes we have to lose to win, but really life's not exactly about winning or losing. Essentially, learn from your mistakes. So on this mower, I got stuck on it because I was afraid of making the wrong mistake. I didn't know what to do or move forward. I bit the bullet, I swapped the engine out. This thing works great now. I did not fix that old engine in there, and I felt a little bit like I was letting you guys down, letting myself down by not fixing that old engine. But at the end of the day, I don't think it was really worth my time. I don't know how close I was to getting it fixed. But sometimes we have to take one and move on. And if we don't accept it and don't move on, that's when we really lose. So we gotta move on sometimes, and that's what we're doing here. And well, hopefully you all learned something from what I went through. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Feel free to comment below. We've got this thing running, it's working. So that means now we can get other little things fixed up and get this thing for sale, unless we decide to sell it the way it is. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and get out there. Don't be afraid to break a wrench, but stay safe. Let's keep making stories. We'll catch you guys in the next one. And you might be interested in checking out some of the previous videos on this mower. Thanks, guys.